and welcome. And we'll start off with haBracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. Of course, we are working on V'zot haBracha, the final Parsha of the Torah, and the blessing with which Moses blesses the tribes. So I'm going to go ahead and start the screen share so you can see what we're doing. Here we are. So here we are. Let's go back to here. We were talking about the blessing, just to refresh you, to Zebulun and Issachar, those two tribes. Zebulun being the traders, and Issachar being the scholars, and the scholarship being sustained through the wealth of Zebulun. They wanted to make sure that they paid for the Torah that Issachar was doing, and the reason why Zebulun is mentioned before Issachar, even though Issachar was born before Zebulun, is because Issachar's Torah depended on the finances of Zebulun. So, and we were in the middle of the Rashi, actually. Ki shefa yamim yinaku. This is referring to Zebulun, right? The wealth, the abundance of the seas, they imbibe, they suckle, really, literally, okay? And they say, all right, Yisachar v'Zebulun. So Rashi is saying that it actually applies to both the tribes. So that they would have enough time, free time, pnai, to occupy themselves in the Torah, right? When we make the bracha at the beginning of our lesson, we say, la'asok b'divrei Torah, to occupy ourselves in Torah. So of course, Issachar was a secondary beneficiary of the wealth of the seas, the abundance of the seas. Here we go. Usfune tmune chol. So sufun, right, is that samach. Sorry, that sin is related to tzadik, to the letter tzadik. They sound almost the same. Sa and sa, and safun means hidden. So that I suspect that these both mean the same thing. Tmune also means, tamun is something that is buried away, set aside and put away. Hole of sand. In other words, things buried in the sand. Let me find the place here. Right. Usfune tmune chol. Right. The treasures, let's say, of what is buried in the sand. So kisuye tmune chol. So he tells us that sfune means kisuye, covered up, something covered up from what is buried, that which was covered and buried in the sand. And he says they are tarit. He's giving you two examples of these things that are buried in the sand. Although it doesn't seem to me, apparently Rashi translates tarit in his commentary on Megillah, which comments on this verse right here, Megillah Vav, that tarit is tuna fish, which I think is interesting. I mean, tuna fish isn't buried in the sand, but maybe we can sort of push the meaning. Chilazon is the name of that shell with which they would dye the talit. I believe it's Tyrian purple they would get from this murex shell. Uzachuchit levana, and white glass, hayotzim min hayam, which come out of the sea. Well, of course, the sea covers up a lot of things. So maybe this fune can refer to that which is under the sea. Umin hachol. Okay, so that, of course, it comes from the sea, the glass, and is from the sand. Uvechalko shel Yisachar v'Zebulun haya. And in the portion of Issachar and Zebulun, it was Kamosh Amru Masechet Megillah, and in Rashi, in his commentary, actually references Masechet Megillah, the tractate of Megillah. as they said in the tractate Megillah, referring to Shoftim, Judges 5, Zevulun am Cheref. This is a difficult verse, obviously, right? Zevulun, a nation cursed, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're cursing themselves, but we'll see. Nafsho lamut, his soul to die. Literally, that's what it means. But I believe that we will see how this applies. We'll see. Mishum de Naphtali. So what was this? All right. So we're saying that the reason for this verse, Mishum de Naphtali al Merome Sadeh, because the tribe of Naphtali was on the heights of the field, literally, and apparently, I guess that is a lovely place agriculturally to grow produce. Naphtali. So Naphtali had this lovely area. Shehayam mitraem Zevulun, because Zevulun complained about al chelko, regarding his own portion. La'achi. Okay, this is what he said. Forgive me. Quote: "La'achi natata sadot ukramim." To my brother Naphtali, you gave fields and vineyards, etc. So apparently, Zevulun was cursing a nation, the nation being the tribe of Naphtali, Nafshol, Lamut. Literally, I'm wondering, it means sort of to the nth degree, right? He was so upset about it, is essentially what this is saying. Usfune, so this safun, lashon kisui. It has the meaning of being covered, something covered up. Kamo shenemar, as it states, this is Kings 1, Malachim Aleph, chapter 6, Vayispun et habayit, they covered the house. And this is referring to the temple and how they covered the walls. They put this covering over the walls. Okay, and then chapter 7, it says, Usfun be'erez, right? So it was covered, it had this covering of cedar, the targumo, umitlal bekiyure, right? So apparently that is the Aramaic for this safun be'erez. So again, it says Kiyure in this, but there are other manuscripts, Farim Acherim, that say Besiyui Arza, right? They covered it with the covering of cedar. Erez is the Hebrew, and Arza is the Aramaic. Davar Echer, right? And so another interpretation to all of this, Amim Har Yikra, that verse that says nations would call to the mountain. So Har, without any question, refers to Har Habayit. It refers to the Temple Mount, right? So they called nations to the Temple Mount. And how does that apply in this verse? That's the part of the blessing. Al Yedei Pragmatia Shel Zevulun, by means of the trade in which Zebulun engaged, Tagre Ovdei Chochavim Ba'im El Arzo, merchants of idolatrous nations, in other words, non-Jewish people, came to his land, to Zebulun's land, Vahu Omed Al Hasafar, and the place of where Zebulun was on the I believe this is referring to the border, that it was a border country. It was certainly on the border with the ocean or the Mediterranean Sea. So they would come to trade with Zebulun, Vehem Omrim, and these traders would say or would think, right? Aru Adkan, since we've taken the trouble of coming up to this place, right, to trade with Zebulun, Nelech ad Yerushalayim, let us go to Jerusalem. We might as well go to Jerusalem because we've come this far. So that we can see, literally it means, what is the fear of this nation? But what it really means, of course, is what God they worship. We'll see what God they're worshiping. Uma ma'aseh, and the acts, the deeds of this. Now, ma'aseha is probably Uma. It's referring to the nation. What are their practices? What are their customs? V'heim ro'im kol Yisrael uvdim, and they see Kol Israel, all the Jewish people, Ovdim le'Eloha Echad, they see that all of the Jewish people are worshiping one God, V'ochlim ma'achal achad, and they also eat one type of food. They all keep kosher, halavai, right? They all, because they're obviously not eating everything. They're all observing and limiting what their diet is going to be, and they share that diet. Shehavdei, because as opposed to Ovdei Kochavim, the idolaters, literally, Elohut Shelzeh, lo ke Elohut Shelzeh, because the God of one is not like the God of the other. Uma'achalo shelzeh lo ma'achalo shelzeh, and the diet of the one is not like the diet of another. V'heim omrim, and these merchants say, they think, ein umak sheira kazo. There is no other kashera, appropriate nation like this. So it's more than appropriate. That's not, that is a meaning that kasher can have. But they're saying that they have, that the way in which they behave is just so impressive, right? Umitkairim, and they decide they want to become part of Israel. They want to join that nation. Make mitkairim sham, and there they decide they want to become part of the Jewish people too. Shne'emar, as it states, sham yizbechu zivchei tzedek. There they offer up righteous offerings, and that's all there too, right there. Sham yizbechu zivchei tzedek. So Rashi has connected it, this davar acher, this amim har yikra'u, in that interpretation, and the very next little piece of the verse. Let me make sure that, right. Ki shefa yamim yinaku, for the abundance of the seas they suckle. Zebulun v'Yisachar, again, the they referring to Zebulun and Yisachar. Hayam noten lahem mamon v'shefa. The seas provide them substance, right? Literally, mamon, of course, means wealth, right? V'shefa, in abundance. Right? So it's as if they're suckling from the sea. Next one. Ulagad Amar, and to God he said, Baruch Marchiv God. Blessed is the one who enlarges, widens God. Notice, of course, that he mentions the word name God twice, and Rashi has explained to us that these particular five, the five of these tribes, Zebulun being one of them, God being one of them, that he mentions them twice because they were comparatively weak with in respect to the other tribes. However, look at what he's saying. It's interesting, though, that in some ways, perhaps he's reinforcing God this way. Kelavi shachen, he crouches like a lion. V'taraf zoa afkad kod, and he tears the arm or the leg and the head. Kod is like the skull, the head. Here we go. Baruch Marchiv God. Blessed is the one who enlarges God. Melamed Shaya Tmumo Shel God Marchiv V'holech Klapei Mizrach. So what this tells us is that the boundary of God was enlarged and continued to be enlarged towards the east. Kelavi Shachen, he crouches like a lion. I believe, I'm trying to think if it's a young lion, but I think it's essentially a lion. The fish haya samuch lasfar, and because he was right next to the border, the fichach nimshal ba'ariyot, he is therefore compared to lions. Shekol hasmuchim lasfar, because all who live close to the border, tzrichim liyot giborim, They need to be courageous because of course, invasion. They're right there. They're on the front line. So, of course, we say that God was one of the tribes that was weaker than the others. But again, it's comparative, right? So it wasn't that they weren't courageous. The taraf zroa af kod. So, harigehen hayu nikarim. People who they slaughtered or they killed were recognized chodchim harosh im hazroa, because they would notice that these people, sorry about being so descriptive, but they would cut off the head together with the arm, b'makah achat, with one blow. They would, so again, it's essentially trying to express the strength of these people. And let's see if I can go any more. Let me stop here. I've got to, yeah. All right, we'll stop here for now. And God willing, we will meet tomorrow. And I hope I'll be able to end a little bit more positively tomorrow. But of course, this also tells us something about the culture and everything like that. Yes, okay. I'm going to stop the share and see if anyone has any comments to make. Any thoughts? Shira Beth, I know from your background, sometimes you have things that you can add.
I'm not coming up with any thoughts right this minute.
I understand. I know. It's pretty graphic, I'm afraid. But essentially, the reason Moses is trying to bless them with strength and courage and things like that. But it is graphic. Okay, I will stop the recording.